Blog Talk Radio.
All right, it is our first show of 2012. I'm your host, Jennifer Skeeter, along with our two experts, Jumpin' John Provost and Judge Ray Jaffe. How's it feel to be back on the show, guys?
Well, Jen, it is Judge Ray, and it is great to be back for another year of Kick-Ass Fantasy Football. We had a great time doing this show last year, and we are bigger and better this year.
And
what about you?
Sorry, this is Jumpin' John. I'm excited and ready to go. Year two with my good friend Ray, and I'm glad for the additions we have. I think the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football team has made some significant strides over the past year, and I'm excited.
Well, I'm happy to be with you guys, and I know it's going to be a great season. Obviously, we have many months to go and so many things to talk about. And, you know, I feel like I just got back from the Super Bowl, and here we are already in training camp. So,
Jen, how was the Super Bowl experience? Tell our listeners.
Oh, I mean, talk about emotion and, like, the time of your life. I worked for the entire week of the Super Bowl and got to work hands-on with the players and the coaches through Media Day at Radio Row, and then obviously the game itself is just like, you know, it all comes down to that big dance, and it was definitely an emotional experience, even though I don't, neither of those were my teams, but.
Well, we're a couple old men. We're going to have to live vicariously through your experiences this year, I think, Jen.
All right, well, I have a lot to learn, so you can teach me as well.
I'm actually a little intimidated, and that doesn't happen easily. So that's great. It's a great experience, and that's something I think everyone listening to the show wishes they could go through.
Well, I'm looking forward to New Orleans this year, so I will let you guys know how that goes. But so now, you know, we're in training camp season, but there's still guys, you know, being shuffled around. So let's start talking. Let's start talking with the AFC North teams. Let's start with Baltimore, and you know, who's moved around there.
So So way to jump into it. I think that's the way to go. We're gonna hit it hard and fast this year. We're gonna get the information out on the table. I think we're gonna walk through. It sounds like the league and sort of talk about comings and goings across the different teams and some new faces to think about. So. Baltimore pretty much status quo for me. They picked up Bernard Pierce, who might be a nice handcuff for Ray Rice in the draft. Other than that, coming back with more or less the same team. Lee Evans off the team this year, but he until the very end of the season he had a very, very minor fantasy impact. So. I think for me, John, Baltimore is pretty much going status quo. It's been working for them the last couple of years.
Baltimore has been mentioned as a Super Bowl contender, and you definitely have to believe in that. They've been very strong, playoff bound for a couple of years. Good solid coaching, good solid players. I guess obviously I'm interested in honestly Jacoby Jones. And I'm going to start off with little nuances because Jacoby Jones has always been someone that's been a tease to me. He's always seemed like someone that's going to break out in Houston, and he never has, whether he was just overshadowed by Andre Johnson or not. But here he is in Baltimore, and they have some strong receivers, but even with Anquan Bolden on the team, no one's really stepped up to the plate to be that really true go-to guy, number one. And not that I think Jacoby Jones is, but I think he can really play a supplemental role. So, I'm kind of interested in seeing how he does.
All right, guys. Well, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how everything plays out this year. What are you guys thinking about the Bengals?
Well, John, I'll kick off with the AFC North, and I'll let you kick off with the next division. Just because I love talking about the AFC North. No, I don't know. But, the Bengals, they're going to be an interesting team this year. the Andy Dalton, and I don't want to get into the whole. We will go through divisional recaps and a much more in-depth analysis all through the preseason leading up to the big time, the regular season. But Cincinnati certainly is an interesting team. The big addition, well, two big additions potentially. BGE, so Ben Jarvis, the law firm of Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, is now a Bengal. Likely playing that Cedric Benson role of a sturdy back. I look for him to get more touches than he got in New England. I don't know that I think he's a wonderful back, so I think he'll get some touches. I don't necessarily see a big year from him. I think an interesting person to watch out for is Mohamed Sanu, as A.J. Green continues to probably build on his phenomenal rookie year. I think Sanu might be a threat on the other side of the ball as Green takes the attention away.
Yeah, BGE is a solid pickup. You got to take from that they didn't think Bernard Scott could fill the full-time role. Scott was great to pick up for a couple games throughout each year. And what I'm wondering is, with strengthening that receiver core, just as you said, what that really does for the quarterback position. And is Andy Dalton going to take another step up in this league? He had a very good rookie season. I think he kind of tailed off in the end. And with another year with a stronger receiver core, what does that mean for him? So I agree. I like the pickup, and let's see what it does not only for individually, but for receivers, but for Andy Dalton as well.
All right, guys. Now on to Cleveland and the Browns.
So the Browns, as far as comings and goings, are probably going to be maybe the most interesting team this year with a new look. The 28, I think, John, check me, Jen, 28-year-old Brandon Weeden, I think, is a rookie, taking over at the helm there. And Trent Richardson, third overall pick in the draft. I look for Richardson to have a tremendous rookie impact, the biggest rookie impact of anyone coming into the league. Cleveland quietly has or maybe not even so quietly anymore, has a very good line. Joe Thomas, of course, the All-Pro. Pinkston coming on that left side. I look for big things from Richardson this year. I think he's going to have a very big season.
I'm excited as well. I mean, as usual, Ray, we're actually in sync, which doesn't necessarily make for exciting radio.
Which means everyone should go the other way.
Yeah,
if we agree, do something different.
No, I like Trent Richardson. I think he's a very solid pickup. I've actually done a few mock drafts already, and I'll be honest with you, I'm a little surprised maybe how high he's gone in some of these. But Trent Richardson, you got a surefire starting running back who's going to take the bulk of the carries, and I'm not sure how many teams can say that anymore. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on, and see how far it carries him. I think Brandon Weeden's got potential, and as a 28-year-old can probably have a little higher game than most rookie quarterbacks coming in, not named Cam Newton. So it's definitely someone to watch. I'm not sure of Cleveland's playoff bound, but I definitely see an increase in both their performance as a team and statistics from a fantasy perspective.
All right. Well, at least I don't have to break you guys up just yet this first week. We'll get into that later on in the season. And why don't we go to the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, Pittsburgh's sort of similar to Baltimore, has stayed, relatively pat on offense, which not surprising from some of the successful teams. What's been interesting with Pittsburgh the last few years is they really have turned into more of a passing team. We'll see if they start to go back to the running ways this year. There'll be things to discuss with Pittsburgh, especially the running back situation, with Redmond getting the ball early in the year. But again, he was on the team. This is comings and goings, and no real impact comings or goings on the Steelers this year.
No,
but John, that's your team, so you might know differently.
Well, no, it's sort of an enigma, and I think the only question would be if they're actually posed to take a step back, and just seems to be a little bit of turmoil with them. And you're right, I love the Steelers. I'm a big fan. I'm actually, as you know, an Eagles first, but Pittsburgh's definitely a 1A. But they got a new offensive coordinator in there. Mike Wallace might be a holdout. Their top running back from last year is injured. I think Redmond can step up definitely, but then Mendenhall comes back. When does he come back? What's going to happen? So it's a little bit different of a year. And frankly, I'm not quite so sure they go back to more of a running team. I think they have a lot of receivers they want to keep happy. They want to keep Roethlisberger happy, and I think they may try and stay a passing team. But unfortunately, they are what they are, and the base of that's a running team, and I think that's kind of hindered Roethlisberger's numbers a little bit. So, let's give it a little bit of time and see how they stand out. But, Steelers are a little bit of an enigma for me this year.
All right, guys. Well, right now, as we wrap up the AFC North teams, let's take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with you guys.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for two to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com.
All right, welcome back, guys. We are now going to talk about the AFC East teams, and why don't we just top it off with those New England Patriots who just fell short in the final dance last year.
Well, I'll tell you, New England every year they're tough. They're always going to have an explosive offense. So in a way, it almost doesn't matter who comes and goes to New England. As long as Bill Belichick's there and as long as Tom Brady's there, I think you can expect good things. I like obviously keeping Wes Welker was the biggest deal for them. He may not have gotten the contract that he wanted, but he's there, and I think he's the type of person that is always going to play his heart out, no matter what his money situation is. So I think New England is pretty solid. They shored up the receiving corps a little bit. They're going to they got some young running backs and Green and Ridley. So I think it's going to be more the status quo. I'm looking for a big year from Tom Brady, and they're going to be off and running.
And I don't know what Belichick has up his sleeve this year. They've added Brandon Lloyd, and they added Dante Stallworth. They added Shenko on top of Gronkowski and Hernandez. So he has a stable of receivers and tight ends. Who knows what's up the sleeve this year? Of the new additions, Brandon Lloyd has had some big years in the past. It's the kind of thing where in this offense, some of these things will be things to look for as the preseason sort of develops, and I am very interested to see how Lloyd works in the offense and whether he becomes one of Brady's favorite targets.
As you know, Ray, I'm a big Brandon Lloyd fan, so I'm not sure I'm expecting as big things as I did last year, although that was sort of disappointed me in the end as well. But, so I think it's obviously some great additions for New England, so it's good for them.
Well, this could be a time to swoop in on Lloyd if people are thinking the same way. Maybe they think he's going to get lost in the shuffle, but that's from a fantasy perspective, that's what the preseason's for. You keep an eye. Big thing you look for is to see where the quarterbacks are getting comfortable with these new additions, and if he's getting the targets, he's going to absolutely be worth a flyer.
Ray, I don't want to give you too much of my personal insight. We do have a couple drafts coming up, so got to hold back a little bit, right?
Fair enough.
All right, and then Buffalo. I mean, people are talking about them. What are you guys thinking about? In terms of like the wide receivers, I know David Clowney is new.
I love Buffalo, and I'm not sure it's even as much of their new receivers. I think David Clowney, again, as we mentioned before, David Clowney would be a nice compliment. But he's not going to set the world on fire. But I think a more stable year from the franchise. I'm more excited about their additions on defense, and I think defense. I play defense, so I'm a big proponent, and it's getting to the quarterback and setting the fear into the other team's eyes. I think it's going to go a lot further than just maybe from the offense. So I'm looking at their defensive line. While you can't count that from a fantasy perspective, I'm expecting big things. I think Steve Johnson's going to have another great year, and Ryan Fitzpatrick. You got to count those Ivy League quarterbacks. I think they're real smart, and I think they can do well. So I'm looking good. It's more of addition on the defense that I'm really looking forward to.
So you like the comings and goings, the comings of the new defensive stalwarts for the Buffalo Bills to be maybe an impact defense. The good news about Buffalo is they're the new dream team because they have Vince Young at backup quarterback. So a lot to be excited about in Buffalo this year. There's a new dream team, and it's in Buffalo. Offensive side of the ball, they've stayed relatively pat. It's Fitzpatrick, it's Jackson, it's Johnson, it's Nelson. T.J. Graham, someone to maybe look at again preseason, see how he fits in with the offense there. They certainly had a much better first half of the year than they did second half of the year, particularly offensively. So if they can get that going again, and if Graham can work his way up and sort of slide in front of Nelson, that it might be worth taking a flyer on.
All right, well, let's move a little bit more south to the Jets. With Damian Tomlinson, he retired. He retired, early June this year. So, but they got a bunch of new big-timers, and, Tebow isn't too big at all, but...
Jen, I can't tell you how much airtime we spent on Tim Tebow last year. A quarter of our shows were probably dedicated to Tim Tebow discussion.
Even when we specifically barred his mention.
We had a ban. We had a Tim Tebow ban.
Yeah, it's just amazing, and the amount of publicity he generates. And, obviously if you're going to talk about the Jets, you're going to talk about, first and foremost, Tim Tebow, even though he's not even a starter. So, I can't tell you, just because I can't tell you the impact Tim Tebow will have. There's been talk about having him on the punt team, on the kickoff team, on the cover team. I'm surprised they haven't asked him to play defense. I don't know what's going to happen. And, it could be, the biggest addition since sliced bread, or it could be just another, ho-hum acquisition. And, we don't know right now. So I think, I think having Darrelle Revis in camp and not having him as a subtraction, I think is a huge bonus for the Jets. But again, it almost starts and ends with Tim Tebow. So Ray, I'll let you elaborate on Tim Tebow.
Well, what else can you say about Tim Tebow that hasn't already been said? No, I think from a fantasy perspective, he had some relevance last year as a starter, mostly with his feet than his arm. He piled up some points running the ball. He's just not, I don't think the touches are going to be there to warrant a position in almost any fantasy league unless they do something with Sanchez or Sanchez gets injured or something like that. Stephen Hill might be a guy to take a look at. New addition to the wide receiver core. They've cleared out some of that wide receiver core from last year, so there's certainly some opportunities for some of the young guys to take a spot there, maybe even take that wide receiver 2 slot next to Santonio Holmes, and that's assuming Holmes can keep himself on the team. So, of the new folks on the Jets, he's a guy that I would keep my eyes on.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, honestly, Santonio Holmes just sounds like someone who's ready to explode. Whether he can be, brought back in check or not, we may actually have some brand new receiving core. A lot of Raiders wide receivers changed hands this year, and Chaz Shillings is one of those. And so I think he's got a little bit of experience and he's got a little bit of speed, so he may actually be something to look at as well. I think that the receiving core requires a little monitoring, especially depending on how San Antonio Holmes goes. So
I agree. It's one of those. I agree. It's one of those training camp battles to look at. Is who really emerges on the Jets wide receiving core. I agree.
Well, we're all definitely going to keep our eye out on that squad. And then let's wrap up the AFC East with the Dolphins. And, I mean, they have, across the board, they have a lot of new guys.
Well, they do. They're obviously going to have a new starting quarterback. Who that may be, I'm not really sure. Ryan Tannehill, you got to figure he's going to be given every opportunity to succeed, but being a rookie, I know he's familiar with the offense, but it's still very hard for a rookie to come in and start right away. I know, at the top tier we're going to be having some expectations of that, Andrew Luck, RG3, but, I'm not sure Ryan Tannehill will be quite ready to start. So, we're actually looking at maybe David Gerard as a quarterback. Early indications are he will be given every opportunity to win that. He's got some, he's got Chad Johnson to throw to now. So, it could be a really interesting situation. They lose Brandon Marshall. They get Chad Johnson. They got quarterback battle, which may actually heighten the awareness of all three quarterbacks. So, I think it's going to be a pretty interesting camp for Miami. So, Ray, what do you think?
Yeah, the Brandon Marshall for Chad Johnson was quite an interesting swap. I think they definitely took a step. I'm not sure if they took a step backwards or forwards on the headache department. Maybe it's neutral, but I think they definitely took a step backwards in the talent department at this point in Chad Johnson's career. And I actually, not new, but I actually liked Matt Moore some last year. So Tannehill obviously is their big addition this year. We'll see how it plays out when his time comes. But I do like Moore a little bit. And other than that, there are some new receivers. You have Johnson. You have Nani into the mix, so it's sort of up in the air. I mean, it's who's the quarterback, who are the wide receivers. So a lot to be determined with the Dolphins. The one piece of good news is Reggie Bush had some games last year where he looked like the guy that you thought you were getting, all those years ago out of USC.
And that, it's just as you mentioned, a lot of question marks. And I agree. I think. I was never a big Brandon Marshall fan, but I'm not sure Chad Ochocinco has what it takes anymore. But, he may be looking to prove everyone wrong. And I think with the talent that he had, I won't say he has, but he had, you can't really count him out. But, it's just going to be fun watching that team as they go through camp.
Well, it'll be interesting to see who explodes forward with the Jets and the Dolphins. And with that, we will be back shortly with the AFC West teams.
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at kickassfantasyfootball.com.
Well, obviously, if we're going to talk about the AFC West, we need to talk about the Broncos and their new roster.
Yeah, they Jen, you're right. They added someone. I'm trying to recall. Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Peyton Manning. So I think we could spend a lot of time on Denver's new look and new roster. And that's probably the biggest question going into the fantasy year is, what are we going to get out of Peyton Manning? He certainly is going to be ready to play. So that's the good news. He's back. I think there's still some question about the long ball and how far he can throw it downfield. The healing might still be going on, but he is Peyton Manning. So, obviously that is the biggest new addition this year coming into the season. Although I would argue that Richardson from the Browns is maybe as impactful. Now, as far as the other new faces, a couple wide receivers, certainly, from a tight end perspective, we know Peyton's passed. We know how much he loves the tight ends. One of his old tight ends is now on the Broncos, Jacob Tamme, and I absolutely expect, especially if he's compromised a little bit on the long ball, Tamme will have potentially a very big year, especially if you are in a points per catch league.
He actually was my breakout player for the ESPN show. We were discussing, each of us picked one, and I chose him. I mean, I think he's really smart, and I think, Manning really likes to throw to his tight ends, and I think they're going to work out a system together over the year. So we'll see what happens with that.
Jen, I think we're going to get along great.
All right, well,
it's that central PA attitude that's really going to have Jen fit in pretty well with us. It's easygoing. It's all good. It's all good. Look, I'm going to start this off. Jen, I'm going to charge you with the task throughout our show, and as Ray and I go on, we're going to give some player predictions, and we're going to give some head-to-head competitions. So your task is to make sure that we capture all of our head-to-head competitions, and at the end of the year we can see who was right on a couple of these.
All right, I'm going to keep track here.
Yeah, there's definitely a couple players we would talk about last year, and definitely want to keep track of that throughout the year. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that I don't think Peyton Manning is 100%. And what that means, I'm not exactly sure. I know, there's the regeneration of his nerve is the biggest thing. So it's not, we've heard a lot about his accuracy. He's always been an accurate quarterback. It's arm strength, and it's his ability to really take a hit in the pocket, because I'm not, I'm pretty sure he hasn't really gotten jarred yet in the preseason. So, I'm really anxious to see Peyton Manning after he gets hit a little bit. I think, the big thing on him is he likes a nice, safe, secure pocket. And if he starts getting hit, what's really going to be that impact? And, how is that nerve? And once he gets hit, will it affect the regeneration? That being said, if his arm strength isn't what it used to be, new addition of Jacob Tamme might actually be better than everyone expects, because he was definitely a great safety valve for him a couple of years ago. Now that they're reunited, not only does he have Tamme, but there's Brandon Stokely, who I'm not sure has a whole lot left in the tank, but there's some really great safety valves for him. So, I don't think we're going to see the Peyton Manning mold, but we may still see a good quarterback.
So what's the challenge here, John?
There's no challenge here.
Are you throwing down the gauntlet on Peyton Manning, or are you going to hold off on this?
No. I'm well. Okay. What do we expect out of Peyton Manning? And that was not my challenge. It just evoking memories of last year and the many different player versus player we threw out, and I want to make sure we have a good vehicle to keep track of. But I don't think you're going to see top level quarterback statistics from Peyton Manning. I think you're going to I'm sure he's going to be nice middle of the pack. But frankly, I'm worried about him finishing the year.
I think he.
Well, that's fair enough. We'll see who's right.
Well, we will see who's right. I think in a 12-team league, he's going to be a starter. Maybe even a 10-team league. So I guess what I'm saying is I think he will be, when it's said and done, in the top 10 quarterbacks in the league.
Okay,
so not the Peyton Manning of top 1 quarterback or top 2 or 3 quarterbacks, but I do think he's going to be a starting fantasy quarterback.
And I'll say he's definitely going to be a starting fantasy quarterback, because you're going to have at least one person in every league who's going to start him and stick with him. But I'm not sure he warrants it.
Well, I'll say by the numbers he'll warrant it, not because someone remembers Peyton Manning from 7 years ago.
And I say he won't. Write it down, Jen. Here we go.
Oh, I got it. I'm keeping tabs right now.
I love it.
Right,
we did a lot of these last year, and we both, we had selective memory when it came to figuring out how these got resolved.
Well, don't worry. I have the memory of an elephant. I don't forget a thing. So
that's scary.
Well, let's make a transition.
All of them. I'm not sure there's much to argue about this year.
I'm sorry, John, you broke up. Go ahead, Jen.
No, we're okay. I was just saying, let's make a transition to the Chargers.
So, yeah, the Chargers are they always seem like they could be a powerhouse. Certainly wound up being a little disappointing last year. The big addition for them is Robert Meacham. So, you have Rivers, you have Ryan Matthews. A lot of people like to really break out this year. Robert Meacham was the big addition. Obviously, Jackson is off the team, who had been the go-to guy. So between Meacham and a bigger role for Vincent Brown, I think that's where you turn your attention to. Again, see how the Rivers-Meacham connection shapes up over the preseason. Meacham was one of the crew in New Orleans, where it's hard to always get a read on the New Orleans receivers because Breeze spreads it around so much. There's sort of always like 3 or 4 guys that on any given week could be starter quality material. So for me, I'm going to look to Meacham, see what he's doing as the preseason rolls on.
Okay, well, so here's number 2 for you, Jen. I'm actually going in a little bit of different direction. San Diego's always been a tease. Ray mentioned Ryan Matthews, who we've both been in love with him in years past. I think he's going to have, we'll say, a breakout year, but I'm not sure that's quite accurate because I think he's has been a starter. It's hard to say breakout. I think Antonio Gates is healthy, and I think that's going to be a good thing. He's been definitely injured the past couple of years. I've heard reports that he feels great. He's smiling after every play because he's just amazed at how good he feels. So it's all good for Phillip Rivers. But I think the wide receiver to look at is Malcolm Floyd. I think he's going to step it up. I think he's going to be, he's going to take more of the numbers that Vincent Jackson had and Robert Meacham. Meacham's, again, been a great complimentary receiver, been part of the team, but I'm not sure he's going to be the standout guy that I think Malcolm Floyd can be.
Who did Malcolm Floyd play for last year?
Malcolm Floyd played for San Diego.
Oh, I thought this was the coming and going segment.
Well, but it is.
I'm not going to argue Malcolm Floyd versus Meacham. That's fine. I'm just looking at the guys that are coming and the guys to watch for.
That's fair enough. I just wanted to get a couple of nice documented.
We will break it down in much more detail, team by team, and we will get into these debates of Meacham versus Floyd versus Brown. So we can't go there yet. You can't catch me shorthanded like that. You got to let me become prepared with the facts.
All right, that's all. It's all fair. So let's move on, Jen.
Okay, let's talk about the Raiders. And the only guy that I can really think of that's new is Matt Leinart.
Yes, the journey, the NFL journey for Matt Leinart continues. And, it's interesting because, Carson Palmer as the starter is certainly, an injury risk. So I would not be and almost expect to see Leinart on the field at some point this year. When that time comes, I think, it'll be time to reassess and see whether at some point, things finally click in for him. But yeah, outside of Leinart, not much there. The big loss for them is Michael Bush. Darren McFadden is the main back, the primetime back, but Michael Bush was if everyone remembers, very good last year filling in for McFadden. Elevated himself to clearly a starting running back for a while. So that's out of the gate, not a potential big loss, but we also know McFadden's injury history, so not having Bush could be a problem for them.
Well, Ray, as you know, we all love Bush. We did. Yes. We had any conversation on that last year, and that was well documented. And it was fantastic play for Oakland. So I think they'll miss him, and it's always it's always nice to have that real solid backup. So I think Chicago got a great pickup. I think Oakland, picking up Matt Leinart, so you paid Jason Campbell for Matt Leinart. I think that's a step down. Leinart had his chance to prove things, so should anything happen to Carson Palmer, good luck having Matt Leinart in. I think the Raiders are in a little bit of trouble, without having a really proven backup for Darren McFadden, because Darren McFadden's always an injury risk. I actually like Mike Goodson in that role. I mean, I think he may not have been a superstar at Carolina, but I think he was solid when he was able to play. I would be looking for him as a good, solid backup. I think the Raiders lost a little bit more in the receiving corps. They've always had a big, stable receivers because no one's ever really stood out. So I don't know if that trade for Louis Murphy ever did. I don't know if that went through. There's a failed physical, so I'm not really quite sure what's happening with that. If Louis Murphy is going through or not, but then there's possibly losing him, then Chad Sirlin, so they may actually take a little bit of step back, not having quite the depth in their receiving corps.
Well,
things that make you say, Jen's too young to even know what we're talking about, John. We got to keep the references relevant, I think.
Yeah. So Michael Bush is a great player. What can you say?
He'll be sadly missed.
In terms of the Chiefs, Brady Quinn was, Broncos. Now he's at the Chiefs, and people expected him to do, such big things, I guess, when he first graduated Notre Dame. Where do you guys see him now this year?
I think Quinn is going to be, a perpetual backup in the league. I just don't. I don't think he's got the skill set that's going to get him into a big time starting role. He might be a capable backup, but I think that's sort of where he's going to fall. The real coming this year, and he's not new to the team, but he played all of a quarter last year, then got hurt, and now he's back. So Jamal Charles, who was very high on people's draft boards last year, top 2-3 running back in some instances, back this year. So a big addition for KC, even though he was on the team. And they do have Peyton Hillis. So I am not a big Peyton Hillis fan. He actually was my bust of the year going into last year. So some things get right, some things get wrong. That one got right, and but they might try to do a little thunder and lightning type thing where you have Charles and then bring Hillis in for some short yardage. But that's really the big add there is Hillis, and if Charles does go down again, which everyone's hoping he doesn't, he'll get a chance to bring back his glory from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you on Brady Quinn. And I don't think he ever got a fair shake, but I think there's almost a point of no return, and he's reached that. And I think he'll have a nice little career as a backup. I don't think he's going to unseat Matt Castle, the quarterback. I think there's too much invested in Castle. Plus his roots back to New England and Cornell. I mean, I think Castle's established as a quarterback. I agree with your addition, in quotes with Jamal Charles, and I'm going to say the same thing as an addition, even though he's on the team with Tony Miyake. I mean, he had a really great 2010, as a rookie, and with nothing in 2011 due to his injury. You look for him to come back to 2012. I mean, the Chiefs could actually be a nice surprise team with the running back and a tight end back. I think there's some positive light in Kansas City going into the season for the first time in really a long time. So, could be a good year for Kansas City. I think that division's up for grabs, and obviously we'll get into that later, but let's look for some good things.
Well, I have a suggestion for you guys to, help me as I go back and forth. And, I'm sure you guys are both great at your fantasy game, but what about, the first ever worldwide fantasy football competition, the Fantasy Football Evolution? I know we had Stan Russo on the ESPN show on Sunday just talking about, if you're really good at fantasy football, if you're used to winning your fantasy league, let's see how, savvy you really are. And you can play against the best of the best with Fantasy Football Evolution. So feel free to check that out at www.nextgenffe.com for more details. The winner of the Fantasy Football Evolution receives $25,000, and that isn't too shabby at all. And then there are cash prizes paid to the top 16 players. There's a consolation competition, and first place for that prize is $1,000. So if you really want to know if you are the best of the best and you're used to winning, definitely check this out, www.nextgenffe.com, and maybe you guys should look into that.
Now, this is a worldwide competition, Jen?
Yes, so anyone can join, and I believe it's just $15 for your first team, and then you get a discount for every additional team, and you can purchase as many as you want. So definitely a lot of flexibility there.
So John could get in a league with a kid from Kenya. He might have a shot in this thing.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Well, I think the challenge of any true fantasy football player and any good fantasy football player. So we'll exclude Ray from this conversation, but I think you want to be challenged, and I think you want to go up against good players to see what you got. I mean, it's no fun unless there's which is not the right thing. Unless there's money involved, it's no fun just romping through your league against teams that don't know what they're doing. So I think that's a great thing. I think I'd be excited to join, and anyone who's out there playing fantasy football should look to play against worldwide competition.
I agree with that one. And now let's transition back into the AFC and look at the South teams. And unfortunately, the Titans have been in the news for some sad reasons this week. But in terms of their offense, they have Kendall Wright. What do you guys predict he'll bring to the table this season?
John, do you want me to start on Kendall Wright?
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, I like Kendall Wright. I think that's a good receiver pickup for them. They have Kenny Britt, they have Nate Washington. I think so they have nice receivers, but no real big receivers blocking his sort of emergence potentially. I think the big question is going to be a quarterback. Will Locker continue to mature and grow, and how's that going to play out with Hasselbeck? But again, I think Wright. I do like Wright. I think he's got a good skill set, and if he clicks in with whoever's going to be throwing the ball there, they might have something. So he is someone to put on your watch list this preseason.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for him may be the status of Kenny Britt. Kenny Britt seems to be, I hate to say it, a little brittle. And, he had an ACL injury, and now he's got an issue with his other knee, actually. And he may not be ready. So, Nate Washington is a good veteran. He's had some solid statistics, but, they're going to need someone to step up. And, if Kenny Britt's not there, that gives a good opportunity for Kendall Wright. So, it's all about taking advantage of the opportunities, and so we'll see what Wright's made of. He has the right stuff.
Good job, John.
Yeah, I know. I practiced that. So it'll be interesting. I think Chris Johnson himself may almost be an addition if he gets back to the Chris Johnson of old. It's like adding almost a whole other running back there. So. I like Jake Locker, but let's see what he can do with a rookie wide receiver.
All right. Well, if we look to the Colts now, Jacob Tamme and Manning both gone there, but they definitely have a lot of strength coming in. What are you guys thinking about Andrew Luck?
Well, as I mentioned before, any any rookie quarterback is going to have a hard time coming in and being a big success. Cam Newton was obviously the exception last year, and as much of that had to do with his running abilities as anything. Andrew Luck has all the skill sets. He's been tagged as a number one pick for a couple of years. Unfortunately, I'm not really sure what the Colts have on offense anymore. That I'm not sure the running back situation is that solid. They have an aging Reggie Wayne, an inconsistent Austin Collie, so I think it's going to be very difficult for Andrew Luck to come in and really be a big fantasy superstar. Obviously one other person you want to look at was his Stanford teammate Colby Fleener, and we'll let Ray see if he has anything more to say on Colby Fleener. I think he's got talent, and if he can be a safety valve, that the Colts have traditionally been a good tight end passing team. So we'll see how that goes. But
yeah,
Ray,
I love Fleener. I think from a tight end perspective, he, again, particularly in a points per catch league, he will have a really big year. Luck, everyone's sort of consensus says he is a can't-miss quarterback. But even the can't-miss quarterbacks, you look back in history, Troy Aikman, always comes as an example of 1 in 15. The first season can be rough, especially for a prototypical pocket passer. You're not going to get the fantasy points running, like you said, John. So while I don't think Luck this year turns into a number one quarterback, he's probably a backup type quarterback. I do think Fleener could be a number one tight end. I think he could wind up being a starting tight end in a 12-team league. And there's a lot of overhaul in Indianapolis. So Luck's got his work cut out for him, but it's certainly going to be fun to watch him mature. Also the kind of thing where, again, every report about him, everything people see and you will see, he'll just get better as the year goes on. So he's even someone that you would look to maybe as the year continues to maybe get him on your roster second half of the year.
Well, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they have Justin Blackmon now. He's pretty high in the draft. Initial reaction to him. What do you guys think he will perform this season?
Well, I think it's another case of a high talent, high trouble wide receiver. I mean, we've seen that, all over the place. Des Bryant comes to mind as well. I think you have to be wary. We'll in later shows we'll go into the high risk, high reward. I mentioned that as part of my auction draft strategy. It's an article that'll be posted on the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football site in the coming days. And high risk, high reward. If you're going to expect a lot out of Justin Blackmon, I think he has the potential, but be prepared for a bust. So I think Jacksonville's in trouble in many ways. I think if you're going to look for a receiver from them, I'd actually look for Laurent Robinson. I mean, I think he was a great addition from the Cowboys. If I'm not mistaken, he was actually their leading receiver last year. And, there's not a whole lot there. Possibility of Maurice Jones-Drew holdout, so he could actually be a subtraction. I'm actually looking for Laurent Robinson to hold the fantasy banner for Jacksonville rather than Justin Blackmon.
Well, so first off, we're doing this show, as we do this show is on, what was today, July 31st, I mean August yet. But Blackmon is still not signed, although I expect he will be signed. He has had off-field trouble already. But Jacksonville is really, for me, a fantasy football wasteland this year. There's just very, very I mean, MJD is holding out. Blackman's not signed. Gabbert, we talk about rookie quarterbacks having a tough time. It's different between having a tough time and looking like he really can't play, and he almost looked like he might not be able to play. So I think that's, I think fantasy points are going to be very hard to come from anywhere on Jacksonville. Assuming MJD is in and ready to roll, he's always going to get you something. Although I'm almost afraid that his clock is starting to tick. So from the new additions, Blackman he does have all the talent in the world. He's probably the most talented. He is the most talented rookie receiver coming into the league. But he's got to get his act together, and more so from a fantasy perspective, he needs someone to get him the ball. I actually think he'll be better off if Henny winds up starting over Gabbert as the season goes on.
Yeah, I agree that that black hole comment. Especially if there's any sort of a holdout for Maestro and Drew, into the preseason. Look what happened with Chris Johnson. That just can't fare well. For any of them. So that's going to be a tough year in Jacksonville.
And what about the Texans? Because, they lost Matt Leinart. We talked about how he, continues his travel. But they have Posey now. They have Forsett. Do you think that can provide them, any relief? Well,
I think, Houston's another team where, we talked about it in Kansas City, and we can talk about additions and subtractions from Houston, but I think, the biggest thing for them is additions by their stars staying healthy all year. So you got Matt Schaub and Andre Johnson who both were hurt, at various points last year. If they can stay healthy, that's actually an addition. If you can get 16 games out of both of them, you're looking at a huge high-scoring offense. Go with the strategy even of having both a quarterback and receiver from the same team. You'll get a lot of touchdowns. I'm not as keen on any changes they've made. I think Justin Forsett's a good little back, but they're pretty deep in running back. So how much time he's going to get, I'm not really sure. I'm looking at Houston. They lost Mario Williams. So that's a subtraction on the defense, which may help opposing fantasy offensive players. But from an offensive standpoint in Houston, I'm just looking at an addition by their players staying healthy.
And I do like DeVire Posey as someone to again keep an eye on. They have a good offense. Matt Schaub is a good quarterback. Arian Foster is the consensus number one pick overall. He was a monster last year when he played. And Andre Johnson is a top flight receiver who had a lot of injury problems last year. So, and he's already gotten a little nicked up this camp, and we're 2 or 3 days into camp. So, absolutely, there could be an opportunity there to either slide in if Posey, if Johnson gets hurt, maybe take some time from Walter, or even if not, I think as a third receiver on that team, potentially, you might be able to put up some numbers. So I think he's got an opportunity there, and I would watch him during the preseason.
Yeah, obviously there's opportunity, and losing Jacoby Jones, I'll throw him in because you talk about him and Kevin Walter. If you look back in Houston, they had a lot of difficulty with consistency at either a second or third receiver spot. So beyond Andre Johnson, it's really been a crapshoot as to who's going to perform well in any given game. Even when he's out, you think you can count on a few people, but that's why I just kind of caution, obviously preseason, very beginning, anyone from a receiver standpoint other than Andre Johnson, just really caution, expecting a whole lot out of him. Maybe Posey will break that mold. I think he's big enough and has got some downfield speed. So I think if anyone could break it out, I think he's someone who may be able to do it, but just with a little bit of caution there.
And just remember to all of our listeners that if anyone ever has any questions, they want your advice or your expert advice, please just feel free to join the chat room on the Blog Talk Radio studio. John and Ray are more than happy to answer your questions, and feel free to call in. I will put you through to them. And every week, keep checking out the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football website. We have auction strategies, and we even have a fantasy draft playlist. you can win tickets to the Fantasy Football Fest, which is going to be really exciting. I'm looking forward to that weekend. It's August 18th and 19th in Atlantic City, and we also have some great interviews with some pretty big-time players and sportscasters. And then, again, almost every single weeknight we have a show. Tonight, Wednesdays at 9, and then Thursday at 7, and then Sunday, bright and early on Sunday at 9 a.m. for 97.3 ESPN Radio.
Jen, I'm actually excited. We've revamped our website. We've got a lot more content. We got a draft analyzer on there. We got some average draft position rankings on there. So we've really stepped it up this year. If I'm not mistaken, everyone who signs on to our website gets a free cruise, and I think there's a lot to look forward to from the coming year, not only for our multiple radio shows as you mentioned, but also from our Kick-Ass FantasyFootball.com website.
And
definitely.
Absolutely, just like last year. I mean, I was almost startled when we had our first show today. I'm like, I guess start thinking about football. It's, I'm a fan of all sports. It's baseball season, and my beloved Phillies just had a fire sale today, so it's time to start switching gears and sort of the momentum, just like last year. The momentum will build and build as we get closer to the season. Chat board starts going on, calls start going on, and it just becomes a lot of fun for everybody.
And I'm excited as well. It's definitely a kickstart to the year. I've done a couple mock drafts, as I said, to really get me into the mood. It's sad that that's the mood I'm talking about, but that's all right. We're gearing up for a big season. We're ready to go, and with the expanded coverage, I think it's going to be a good thing for our listeners and for us as well.
Definitely. So it's only $9.95 for the entire year if you become a member. Obviously, if you're not a member, you can only see certain articles that we post. But just like Ray and John just said, if you do become a member, you can win a cruise, which is, who wouldn't want a cruise? And you can have access to all of the great things that they just talked about. So another thing is if you ever have had, some issues with the guys that you're playing with, girls that you're playing with in the fantasy sports leagues, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment, it's Michael A. Stein, and he can resolve any issues for you in any of your fantasy leagues. Talking about trades, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup, roster errors, draft issues. You name it, he knows what he's talking about. It's like the constitution or charter of the league, per se. And it was created by a body of case law that, governs all of fantasy sports. It's $15 for a single case, or you can just go $100 for unlimited cases during the season. So you can check them out at fantasyjudgment.com or follow them on Twitter at fantasyjudgment as well.
Well, let's make sure John takes a note of that. Abuse of power by the commissioner. Did you jot that down, John?
I can't imagine why you'd say that, Ray. I wasn't expecting anything of that sort to come out of your mouth once you mentioned that. So I've taken me completely by surprise.
Well, it's a really interesting service, and I have to say, fantasy football is big business now, and people will put up a lot of money in some of these leagues, even sort of the private leagues where people putting up hundreds and hundreds or more of dollars. So there is, as money's on the line, it makes sense. There's going to need to be an element of making sure it's all fair. So it's an interesting service.
So it's
definitely
one free judgment per member. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Yes. You get for $15 you get your first judgment. But
okay.
If you want to do it, unlimited instead of just paying for individuals every single time, then you can just buy unlimited, buy them in bulk, and that's $100. And that there's going to be tons of controversies as you go throughout the season. So why not just cash it in right away?
No, I think that's a great addition to the website. So Again, lots of changes from our Kick-Ass Fantasy Football website, and a couple changes to our show lineups, and I think it's all good.
Yes. And again, we will be back on at 9 o'clock next week, and we're going to be talking about the NFC North, East, West, and South, and then we'll have some injury reports. And feel free to call in, join our chat room, and you guys have a great evening. That went by quick. Our first show already over.
I know. It's a milestone. This could be a great day in media broadcasting history, Jen. Your first Kick-Ass Fantasy Football radio show.
Well, I'm happy for the addition, Jen. I think you did a great job. As always, I'm happy to share the airways with Judge Ray Jaffe, and so I'm looking forward to a great season for the three of us.
I couldn't agree more. All right, you guys take care out there. Have a great night, and we will be back with you next Tuesday at 9 p.m.